After Violet died during childbirth, my fiancé also took his own life. While sorting through his belongings, I realized just how much he loved her. The 10 years I spent with him, from the basement to the luxurious villa, couldn't compare to the smile she gave him when they first met at 15. So, after returning to my student days, I withdrew my gaze from him. This time, I would let him go. "Mrs. Alexander, it's terrible. The master has committed suicide." Hearing those words, I couldn't help but freeze. The white rose in my hand dropped to the ground. "Emma, this isn't funny." I trembled all over and warned the servant. Emma cried, "It's true, Mrs. Alexander. The master slit his wrists in the bathroom." "What?" I felt a buzzing sound in my head. My legs gave way, and I fell to the ground, instinctively protecting my stomach. Before fainting, the only thought in my mind was, "Suicide? Alexander, why would he commit suicide?" When I woke up, it was already dusk. The smell of disinfectant was unpleasant. There was constant noise outside the ward. A large crowd of journalists gathered at the door. Why did Mr. Alexander commit suicide? Was it due to depression or something else? Rumor has it that Mr. Alexander and Mrs. Alexander were deeply in love and harmonious, but they have never had any plans to have children since their marriage. Was their love all a facade? What was the trigger for his suicide? The noise outside the ward grew louder. Flashbulbs flickered on the glass. I covered my head, trying to ease the throbbing pain. The journalists' questions grew more and more probing, trying to get me to come out of the ward and give a straightforward answer. But I knew that going out to give an interview at this moment would only make things worse. As the vice president of the Shin Group, I had to keep the situation under control. I didn't know how much time had passed. The journalists suddenly fell silent. In their place came a stern female voice. "Who let you in here? Get out immediately." My heart tightened. It was Margaret. Margaret didn't like me. She thought I was too dull and boring, not as cheerful as Violet. The ward door opened. Margaret, dressed in a black coat, walked in. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked exhausted. She threw her bag aside and shouted at me, "How could son suddenly attempt suicide?" I clutched the blanket tightly and shook my head. "I don't know, Mom. I'm just as surprised as you are." "Enough." She stepped forward and slapped me across the face. "You have no right to call me Mom." I covered the stinging side of my face with my hands and lowered my head. Margaret was breathing heavily, looking up at the sky with tears streaming down her face. How could he? How could he suddenly commit suicide? She murmured. A sudden clap of thunder rang out outside the window. Then came a downpour. When I came to my senses, Margaret had already left. The entire room was empty except for me. And the half of the blanket soaked with tears. Alexander's funeral was scheduled for 2 days later. On the same day as Violet's. I held 3 consecutive press conferences, answering all sorts of tricky questions. On the day before the funeral, I finally got to see Alexander one last time. He lay quietly in the center of the hall, surrounded by flowers. I walked up to him and placed a white rose in his hand. Then I sat beside him, silently staring at him for a long time. Looking at the white rose lying in his arms, I felt utterly exhausted. Everyone asked me why Alexander had committed suicide. But in truth, I didn't know either. He was exceptionally talented and gifted from a young age. Even though he was born into a poor family, he never stopped striving. I've been by his side since I was 15. From a dark, damp basement to a luxurious villa. I watched him grow from a shy teenager into a strategic group president. But why did he commit suicide? Why did he leave me behind and go alone? I don't understand. I slowly stood up and placed my right hand on my flat stomach. I murmured, "I never told you I'm pregnant." After the funeral, I returned home and entered the bedroom. The servants had already begun sorting through his belongings. From summer shirts and t-shirts to winter coats and woolen sweaters. They were removing everything piece by piece from the room. According to custom, all of this must be burned. Not a single thing should be left behind. I sat on the bed, watching them sort through his belongings. My mind went blank. Until a servant asked me, "Mrs. Alexander, should we also tidy up the study?" I snapped back to reality. The study was off limits in the house. Alexander never allowed anyone to enter, not even me. I pondered for a moment before standing up. "I'll tidy it up." I had been with Alexander for 10 years. But I still couldn't fathom his inner thoughts. If the study held the things deep within his heart, then I, as his wife, wanted to use my final right. To open it, to explore. Alexander, what kind of man was he? Entering the study required a password. I tried many times. The date of our first meeting. The date of our wedding. My birthday. His birthday. Finally, there was only one chance left. If I entered the wrong code again, the door would lock automatically. I stood at the study door, my palms sweating profusely. If none of these were correct, then what could it be? I realized my hands were trembling. A scene from when I was 15 and celebrating my birthday flashed through my mind. There were few people who came to celebrate my birthday. Alexander, Violet, and me. And Ethan, who was always quiet and had been called over at the last minute. Midnight. The sky was pitch black, and the candles were lit. In the 30 seconds of silence after the birthday song ended, I made my wish and quietly opened my eyes. All I saw was Alexander and Violet locking eyes. Then they smiled at each other. In the glow of the candles, Alexander's gaze was unusually gentle. I thought I had almost forgotten this memory. But the memory, as clear as yesterday, told me that I had always remembered. I just didn't want to face it. I exhaled a breath of stale air and slowly placed my hand on the keypad. "Please, don't. I beg you, Alexander. Don't treat the past 10 years as a joke." I stiffly entered the numbers. Under my desperate gaze, the door opened. I stared blankly at the open door. Tears fell onto the floor. I couldn't help but force a self-deprecating smile. I walked into the study. The study was dark, with no lights on. I flipped the switch, and the room suddenly brightened. The high-wattage lights swept away all the darkness. It also revealed everything before me, laid bare. There were no books in the study. Only rows of oil paintings. I picked one up, and clearly written on it was, "Suing. My Violet." Everything in the room was related to her. Even the walls were cherry blossom pink. Delicate and beautiful. I looked at everything in despair, like a lost stray animal, not knowing where to go or what to do. Should I lose my mind? But Alexander is dead. Should I break down? But Alexander is dead. I suddenly realized that no matter what I did, it wouldn't matter. Whether I hated him or loved him, it wouldn't matter. The study faced the direction where the sun rises. I finally understood why Alexander wasn't by my side every morning when I woke up. At the far end of the room was a set of chairs and a desk. I walked toward it slowly. My steps were painful and numb. On the desk lay a notebook. It was filled with entries, starting from when he was 15 and continuing up to the present. His feelings for suing that he could never express. Every word was filled with warmth. I flipped through it and stopped at the last page. It read, "If one day you leave me, I will rush to you no matter what. Life and death cannot separate us. Boom! Thunder roared across the sky. Heavy rain poured down. So, he didn't commit suicide because of depression. He did it for love. I posted this online, anonymously, hoping to find a solution from netizens. But they ignored my plea. Instead, they commented, "Oh my God, such a beautiful love story, such a tragic ending. What a tragic tale of a prodigy falling from grace for love. To be honest, the OP should have let them be together back then. Such a waste of a couple. +1 to the post above. I swiped through the screen, watching netizens cheer for this relationship, sighing over their ending. What about me? If he had liked suing back then, why didn't he push me away? If they were the most beautiful love in the world, then what am I? I turned off my phone, opened the window, and threw it out. Watching the phone shatter into pieces, I finally realized who I was. I was nothing. I was just a clown. The funeral began. I watched the black coffin slowly sink into the ground. Just as it was about to be filled in, I suddenly opened my handbag and took out a letter. Then I lit a lighter and burned the envelope. The paper burned in the air like a fire butterfly. It was the only thing I found in the study that belonged to me. A love letter from when I was 15. But it wasn't because of my true feelings. It was because suing had drawn a little pig on it and written beside it. How silly, her love letter is so cheesy. She can't even use a proper idiom, it's hilarious. Alexander gave her a smile. Small and cute. I had never seen it before. The funeral ended, and the guests dispersed. Journalists surrounded the area, blocking all access. Flashbulbs kept flashing at me. Are the rumors online about you and your husband Violet true? What? I hadn't processed it yet. Online, an insider claimed that it was because you interfered in Violet and Alexander's relationship that they separated, ultimately leading to this tragedy. The crowd was in an uproar. No wonder they haven't had a child after all this time. It was because of this. What a tragic couple. Sigh. Seeing that I couldn't answer, the reporter turned to ask Margaret. I shook my head slightly, looking at Margaret, hoping she wouldn't say anything. At home, I can be myself. But in front of others, at least give me some face. But Margaret sighed and said, if only it hadn't been you who married sooner back then. All these years, I've worked so hard to maintain this marriage. In that instant, it all turned to ruins. I've become a true clown. Under the flash of the cameras, my embarrassment was magnified over and over again. Like a dirty rat. In the 30 seconds it took me to run from the crowd to the car, I regretted everything. I wanted to go back to when I was 15 and Alexander was a stranger to me. I didn't want to grow up with him anymore. Boom! In the rain, the Bentley collided with a car. The car windows shattered, and sharp glass cut my skin. In my final moments, I seemed to see a flash of white light, drawing me toward it. Lillian! Get up and answer the question. A sharp voice broke the silence. I moved my arms, but they were numb. What? Muscle memory from my school days made me stand up instinctively to answer. The people around me burst into laughter, ha ha ha. Lillian, you must be asleep. Quiet! Quiet! The teacher tapped the blackboard and pointed to the question, you answer this question. If you can't, you'll stand here all day. I looked at the dense formulas on the board. I had no idea how to answer. Someone in front of me giggled. It was Violet. And sitting next to her was Alexander. In my previous life, he was the man who had died with her. I saw her lift her innocent smile and whisper to Alexander in a soft voice. How could she be so stupid? Alexander propped his head up, looking at her with adoring eyes. Then he curved his lips slightly and said casually, yeah. I couldn't breathe. At 26, I had also asked Alexander if he still loved suing. If he did, I could step aside and let them be together. Alexander pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and said indifferently, make way? Make way for what? Suing is already married, Lillian. If I truly loved her, I should have eloped with her on her wedding day. At the time, I smiled sweetly, like a child who had finally gotten a piece of candy. It wasn't until now that I realized. Everything was a lie. Marrying me was just a means to an end for suing. He didn't love me. Seeing that I couldn't answer, the teacher pointed to Violet sitting in front of me, suing, you answer for your sister. Suing stood up and said calmly. This question can be solved using Newton's second law. The answer is 16n. The teacher adjusted his glasses and praised her. Very good, very good. He looked at me again and sighed. How can you be so different from your sister? You may sit down. Lillian, go stand at the back of the classroom. I lowered my head, held my book, and walked to the back of the classroom. Along the way, I heard constant laughter. They're sisters, yet they're so different. I even wanted to advise Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan to get a paternity test. If she can't even answer such a question, she shouldn't be in the honors class. She's only dragging down our class average. I hurried past, embarrassed and humiliated. After class, the teacher called me to the office. The teacher pointed to the recent mock exam results and frowned. You can't keep this up, Lillian. You need to follow Violet's example. She then pulled out a ranking list. Suing and Alexander were side by side. One was second, the other third. And I was at the bottom. I lowered my head and mumbled a response. All right, I'll find you a tutor to help you out. The teacher's finger slid across the ranking chart, and I watched calmly. In my previous life, my tutor was an impatient boy. This life would probably be the same. Just as I was lost in thought, the teacher's finger stopped on the top spot. This one, Jiang Xian, you sit behind him. She said. I looked up, staring at her in disbelief. Jiang Xian? The summer breeze blew into the office, feeling especially strong. Jiang Xian. I stared blankly. Isn't he Su Ying's childhood crush? Jiang Xian was our class's Ethan, an unquestionable prodigy. Back then, Su Ying had even threatened her parents with her life to marry Jiang Xian. But the Jiang family was so wealthy and powerful, they wouldn't even glance at our small family. It was a rejection. Later, Su Ying gave in and married the heir of a conglomerate. Jiang Xian, after attending my wedding with Alexander, went abroad to study. We never heard from him again. I returned to the classroom. After sitting down at my desk, I looked at the exercise book on the table. It was filled with formulas I no longer recognized. I recalled the events of my previous life. To pursue Alexander, I abandoned my studies. Even after using connections to get into a key high school, I couldn't escape the fate of attending a vocational college. My parents were deeply disappointed in me and stopped caring about me after I turned 18. Someone asked them, if you could use connections to get me into a provincial key high school, why did you send me to college during the college entrance exams? Even studying abroad would be better than attending a vocational college. They just smiled and said, having children is like an investment. Lillian isn't worth investing in anymore. She can't compare to Vi. Once she's an adult, even if she dies on the streets, it's none of our business. I looked out the window. I exhaled a breath of stale air. This life. I don't want to regret it anymore. I want a better future. A future of freedom. Jiang Xian had taken a leave of absence recently. None of my classmates were willing to help me with my homework. They all looked down on me and said, even if we explain it to you, you won't understand. It's a waste of time. I had no choice but to lean over my desk and memorize physics formulas. A passing classmate glanced at me and couldn't help but mock. You're only thinking about turning your life around now that the exams are almost here? What were you doing all this time? The classmate next to her pulled her arm. She looked at Su Ying and Alexander, who were studying math problems together in front of us, then looked at me and said, she's probably been busy chasing after someone, but they don't even notice her. It's hilarious. I tried to focus on the formulas. But I felt someone's gaze and looked up, accidentally meeting Alexander's eyes. At 16, his face was still youthful. He was wearing a blue and white school uniform, full of youthful vigor. But the look he gave me was filled with contempt. It was as if he was looking at a disgusting insect. Oh, don't say that, Su Ying said gently. Everyone has the right to try their best. The two classmates who had mocked me earlier immediately changed their expressions. They gave Suing a friendly smile. Suing, you're just too kind. You'll end up getting hurt. I immediately lowered my head. It wasn't because of their open and hidden insults. It was because the scene before me had become blurry. I thought of my 16-year-old self in my previous life. Alexander was tutoring me. In the sweltering summer heat, he patiently explained those complicated problems to me over and over again. The sunlight shone on his hair. 16-year-old Alexander seemed to be glowing. But now, the light seemed to have gone out. There were only 3 months left until the high school entrance exam. There were only half a month left until the second mock exam. I struggled to catch up on the lessons I had missed. Complicated physics formulas. Confusing math problems. Endless chemistry reactions. Countless essay topics, ancient poems, and classical Chinese texts. Everything felt like terrifying obstacles blocking my path to success. And I couldn't avoid them. Just when I was at a loss, Jiang Xian returned. He looked down at me from above, then gently took the test paper I was working on. The red crosses stood out prominently. But he didn't show any disdain. There's an easier way. He tapped the paper, picked up the red pen on my desk, and quickly wrote out 3 different solutions. Just apply the formula here, no need to make it so complicated. He looked up at me. Do you understand? I stared blankly at him. Jiang Xian was wearing glasses. The sapphire earring in his left ear sparkled in the sunlight. His eyelashes were long, like a fluttering butterfly. I still don't understand, I said shyly. Jiang Xian lowered his eyes and said, Then I'll explain it again. Suing, who was sitting in front, suddenly turned around. She smiled at him and said, Jiang Xian, I don't understand this question either. Can you explain it to me? Jiang Xian pushed his glasses up and said slowly. Sorry, I'm busy. Suing smiled, her smile innocent and sweet. Then I'll wait until you're free to explain it to me. When will you be free? Jiang Xian said casually. When I'm reincarnated as a pig in my next life. I smiled for the first time since I was reborn. The story of Jiang Xian explaining the problem to me quickly spread throughout the entire grade. At first, they were surprised that Jiang Xian, a top student in competitions, would actually explain a problem to someone else. Then, jealousy set in. How clever of Lillian to act so pitiful and get the teacher to assign Jiang Xian to tutor her. Of course, if it were anyone else, I wouldn't say anything, but Lillian's intelligence. Useless. It won't be long before Jiang Xian gets annoyed with her. She's so stupid. I've heard similar comments countless times. But not once did I look up from the sea of problems. Not once. I sat at my desk, chewing on my pencil, struggling with a problem. Jiang Xian had been called away to participate in the physics competition again. Still, no one was willing to help me with my problems. Just as I was about to flip through my study guide, someone tapped on my desk. I looked up and saw only his cold gaze. It was Alexander. Lillian, the teacher asked me to switch with Jiang Xian. Switch what? I asked with a frown. Alexander said, Little teacher. It's useless for you to listen anyway, isn't it? You might as well give it to Suing. They can tutor each other and get more spots for direct admission. I was stunned. If loving someone secretly makes your lungs feel like a million butterflies are fluttering inside, then when you're disappointed in someone, your entire body feels like it's on fire. After the fire burns out, even your heart is reduced to ashes. There's no coming back. I looked at Alexander directly for the first time. My eyes welled up with tears. My throat felt dry. I said, Alexander, it's not just Suing who wants to get into a good school. I want to too. I ran out of the classroom, leaving Alexander standing there alone. What's wrong with Lillian? Why did she run so fast? Is she crying? A girl asked. Another girl rolled her eyes at her. If she's crying, let her cry. Do we need to give her an award? What award? An Oscar? A few people burst into laughter. Alexander lowered his head and shouted, "Enough!" The classroom fell silent. I ran to the restroom. In the narrow stall, I roughly wiped away my tears with my sleeve. After wiping them away, I took out my vocabulary book. Chemistry, chemistry, I sniffed. Chemistry, chemistry. There were only 3 days left until the second mock exam. I had to win. The second mock exam finally ended. Jiang Xian's competition results were also announced. First place. He had secured a spot at a top provincial high school. I smiled and congratulated him. Congratulations. You don't have to take the exam anymore. He looked at me calmly. Then he spoke softly. Do you want to get into a top provincial high school? I blushed and said, of course I do, but it's probably impossible. Why? I don't believe in myself. I said slowly, I'm very confused about the future. As summer approached, the sun outside the window grew brighter. I looked out the window at the dappled tree shadows, where boys were playing basketball below. Cheers filled the campus. Well said, instead of believing in yourself, believe in fate. Jiang Xian suddenly said, so, I know a little palm reading. Do you want me to take a look? I turned around and smiled. I handed him my hand. Jiang Xian took my hand. He examined it carefully. His hands were large and warm. He looked at it for a long time. I couldn't help but ask him, Master Jiang, did you see anything? Jiang Xian finally looked up. He smiled broadly and pointed to a few lines on my palm with his index finger. It says you'll not only get into the provincial key high school but also into a university. You'll achieve everything you desire and live a fulfilling life. I was about to laugh it off as nonsense. But I saw the seriousness in his eyes. It didn't feel like my destiny. It felt like his promise. The results of the second mock exam were out. I was still at the bottom of the rankings. I stood there dumbfounded, feeling like I'd fallen into an ice cave. My whole body was shivering. Why? Why doesn't hard work pay off? I clenched my fists, struggling to breathe. A classmate couldn't help but mock me. You really think you're a genius? Go wash up and go to bed, Miss Sullivan. If you can't make it, just drop out of high school. With grades like that, it's useless. You might as well go home and get married early. I lowered my head, staring at my toes. Tears fell. They hit the tile floor and disappeared. Don't talk to her like that. Suing pulled the classmate aside. She's already trying so hard, staying up late every night. The classmate glanced at the ranking chart and smiled. Suing, you're the most down-to-earth one here. Congratulations on your progress. Maybe you'll get admitted alongside Jiang Xian. Suing smiled sweetly. Thank you. Before leaving, the classmate added, seriously, I think you and Jiang Xian are a perfect match. Like the male and female leads in a school romance novel. Su Ying didn't argue. Instead, she smiled even more shyly. The surrounding classmates immediately started teasing her. I slowly walked out of the classroom. Like a dirty rat. After being seen by its owner, it fled in panic. I hid in the bathroom again. This time, I still brought my vocabulary book. Tears kept welling up in my eyes and fell onto the book. The letters gradually blurred into a mess. I couldn't hold back anymore and curled up, crying. After crying, I washed my face. Then I returned to the classroom. But I bumped into Jiang Xian at the corner. He was out of breath, his face flushed. His glasses were off, and his hair was a bit messy. He said, Lillian, congratulations. I was stunned. What? There was a system error, and they forgot to add 3 of your grades. He tilted his head, smiling at me, so congratulations, you're 10th. I widened my eyes. So Jiang Xian disappeared right after class because he went to argue with the teacher. He believed in me. He believed in my efforts, not just empty words. Even the slightest progress was enough. But the teacher refused to believe it. It wasn't until he contacted the Jiang family that the truth was revealed. I cried until I couldn't breathe. "Thank you," I said. "Really, thank you. I worked even harder. I wanted good grades and a bright future. Even though my parents mocked me, saying I was just a top 10 student in the class. I couldn't even reach the threshold of the provincial key school. But I still studied late into the night. Finally, I succeeded in the high school entrance exam. I got into the provincial key school." The family raised their cups in celebration, but it wasn't for me. It was for Suing. My parents even held a graduation banquet for her. It turned out, it wasn't because I was useless that I was abandoned. They simply didn't love me. I watched Suing being embraced by my parents, surrounded by flowers and applause. Even Alexander worked for months to earn money for her. All for a bouquet of 99 Australian white roses. He looked at her with tenderness and handed her the bouquet. Everyone cheered. Suing blushed and accepted them. I lowered my head, unable to suppress a mocking smile. In my previous life, Alexander and I were getting married, and I was torn over what flowers to choose for the bouquet. When Alexander found out, he simply said, "White roses." I asked him why. He didn't answer. I stubbornly believed it was because he wanted to tell me the meaning of white roses. Pure and flawless love. Only now do I realize that it was indeed because of the meaning of the flowers. But the person he wanted to tell wasn't me. I stood in the corner, silently raising my glass. To you, to youth. To my foolish past life. As the strong alcohol burned my throat, I decided to let go completely. Alexander suddenly turned to look at me. We locked eyes for a long time. His gaze was no longer as cold as before. Instead, it was filled with panic. As if he had lost something priceless. "Alexander, what are you looking at?" Suing asked him sweetly. Alexander turned back, his heart pounding. He lowered his head and smiled. "Nothing, maybe I was in a hurry and lost something." "Is it important?" He remained silent for a long time. "Probably." He grew increasingly anxious. "It must be something important." Many years later, Alexander recalled that afternoon of celebration. Suing, wearing a white dress, stood on stage, radiant. Her cheeks flushed as she thanked him for the white roses he had given her. But he, for some reason, turned his head away. He looked toward the corner of the stage. Lillian stood there, calmly looking at him. They gazed at each other. Because of Suing, he averted his eyes. When he looked back again, she was no longer there. This was the most regrettable thing he had ever done in his life. Love is heat. Being loved is light. In my previous life, I spent my entire life pursuing love. But in this life, I am tired. I only want freedom. In the vast darkness, let me be my own light. There is no need for 3,000 lamps. One lamp is enough. After entering high school, I studied even harder. Time and again, I pushed myself to the limit, and my grades became increasingly outstanding. In the second semester of my sophomore year, I made it into the top 5 in my grade for the first time. The teacher singled me out for praise. Everyone should learn from Lillian. The classroom fell silent. I sat nervously in my seat. I didn't know what to do. I thought they would mock me like my middle school classmates did. But to my surprise, the silence was followed by thunderous applause. And cheers. "Wow, that's so awesome! From the bottom of the grade to the top. That must have taken so much determination. That's amazing. It makes me not want to give up. Awesome! Lillian, you're awesome." The applause continued for a long time. I widened my eyes and looked up in disbelief. The teacher stood at the front of the classroom, smiling at me. "Your efforts are evident to all of us," she said. "Lillian, you're really amazing." My eyes welled up with tears. After class, some classmates came to ask me questions. Just like I was back then, I was nervous beyond belief. I was afraid of being rejected. And because I didn't want to lose face, I pretended to understand. I patiently explained it to him over and over again. Just like Jiang Xian had done to me back then. I knew the world was dark and unpredictable. But I would still hold up a flame. I would do my best to illuminate a corner of the world. I believed that flame would keep burning. Until the darkness was ignited. And the sky would be bright again. All things would revive, and the sun would shine brightly. In my senior year, Alexander suddenly found me. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes. I looked at him calmly. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Lil," his voice trembled. "You liked me, didn't you?" I frowned and took a few steps back. Lil. That name was only used by the Alexander from my past life. And only in bed. I felt sick to my stomach. I forcefully broke free from his grip. "Don't call me that," I said. "It makes me feel sick." His hand hung in the air. Then, it slowly dropped. I turned to leave. Alexander, with red eyes, said to me, "Can you give me another chance?" I stopped in my tracks. I turned to look at him. In the dim alley, Alexander, shrouded in darkness, hoarsely called out my name. "Please, give me another chance. Love me one more time." Like a trapped beast. I knew he had been reborn too. I didn't ask him why he had died for love in his previous life. Why he had married me even though he didn't love me. Why he had abandoned me. Why so many whys? The 10 years I loved him were shrouded in mist. So much so that only sighs remained. But in the end, I didn't ask anything. I just looked at him with a sense of release and said, "Alexander, I won't love you anymore. Never again." Alexander's gaze shattered. Those beautiful almond-shaped eyes lost their luster, no longer youthful. Boom! Thunder echoed across the sky. It started raining. I took an umbrella out of my bag, opened it, and walked out of the alley without looking back. Cold raindrops hit the umbrella. Drip, drip. It was pouring heavily. I suddenly recalled the day in my previous life when I was sorting through Alexander's belongings. The rain was just as heavy then. The pitch-black rain-soaked night seemed endless, with my nostrils and lungs perpetually damp. But in this life, I took a deep breath. And smiled. My life would never have such a rainy night again. Goodbye, Alexander. You were once my sun. But now, I will be my own light. I thought that was the last time I would see Alexander. Until the next morning, when I found breakfast in my desk. There were a few pieces of imported chocolate. My classmates laughed and told me, "Lillian, you're so lucky, Alex actually likes you." I frowned. I turned around and threw the breakfast into the trash can. "Oh my God!" The male students exclaimed, "That's such a waste, Lillian. If you're not going to eat it, share it with us." I looked at the breakfast in the trash can. I asked him, "Should I pick it up?" The male student twitched his lips and said, "Forget it. What's the difference between that and feeding a dog?" I smiled. The story of me throwing away Alexander's breakfast quickly spread throughout the school. In the dull and tense high school life, such gossip was the most intriguing. But it was different from when Jiang Xian had helped me with my homework before. This time, no one scolded me. Like a joke, the matter was soon forgotten. During this time, Suing came to find me. Her eyes were red and she looked pitiful. She confronted me. "Why did you throw away Alexander's breakfast? Do you know how much that hurt him?" I flipped through my physics notes indifferently. I don't know, and I don't care. You. Suing slammed her hand on the table. Pointing at my nose, she tried to say more, but was interrupted by a classmate beside me. The classmate said helplessly, "Suing, that breakfast was from Alexander to Lillian. How she disposes of it is her choice. The parties involved aren't upset, so why are you?" Suing couldn't say a word. She glared at me angrily. Then, with a cold laugh, she said, "You'll never be as good as me." The student who had come to ask a question pushed his glasses up and asked in confusion, "What are you comparing? Specific heat capacity?" Suing. She glanced at her watch and said, "Classmate, have you finished your question? If you're done, go back to your own class. Don't take up the seat." The classroom erupted in laughter. Suing stormed off. Alexander continued to bring me breakfast every day. Until the next month. Jiang Xian returned. He glanced at the breakfast on my desk with a complicated expression. From then on, no breakfast ever appeared on my desk again. The second week after the breakfast disappeared, Alexander blocked my path again. "What's your relationship with Jiang Xian?" he asked. I glanced at him. "You have no right to ask me," I said. A pained expression appeared on Alexander's face. Just as I turned to leave, he grabbed the hem of my shirt. "Don't treat me like this," he said. His voice trembled and sounded fragile. Like a stray dog. I felt no pity. I roughly pulled his hand away. "Alexander," I said, "we're strangers now. You've crossed the line." He looked up at me, his expression filled with disbelief. "You said you'd love me forever," he said, his voice growing hoarse. "In the presence of God, you said I do." I replied coldly. "So what? Alexander, you also said I do. We swore before God, prayed for blessings at the altar of marriage, and you said you would love only me." But I smiled, sarcastically and helplessly. "You still chose to die with Suing, didn't you?" Alexander froze. I walked toward the exit. "Let's not meet again." But at the exit, I saw Jiang Xian. He was sitting in the Maybach, lazily resting an arm on the window. His slender, slightly veined hand held a thin cigarette. I froze. My steps slowed. "Get in," Jiang Xian said. I quickly reacted, opened the door, and got in. Alexander immediately followed. He tapped on the rising window and demanded, "What's your relationship with him?" Jiang Xian lowered the window slightly. His eyes were filled with coldness. "It's none of your business." Looking at Alexander still clinging to the car outside, I made a decision. I leaned closer to Jiang Xian and kissed him in front of Alexander. The clouds dispersed, and sunlight spread out. Alexander kept banging on the window, trying to stop us. Jiang Xian, however, held my chin and deepened the kiss. The smell of cigarettes lingered inside the car. It wasn't unpleasant. Instead, there was a faint, cool floral scent. I didn't push him away. After that, I never saw Alexander again. Until 2 months before the college entrance exam. Suing confessed her feelings to Jiang Xian. After being rejected by Jiang Xian, she cried and asked him, "Why can my sister, but not me?" I watched her cry coldly. Tears fell one by one onto the ground. My heart remained unmoved. Jiang Xian said indifferently, "Roses aren't the only exception. Lemons are too." After hearing this, I smiled to myself. After being rejected, Suing turned her attention to Alexander. She began to pursue him relentlessly. The news spread like wildfire throughout the school. In the end, Alexander rejected her. When I heard the news, I was solving a physics problem. The pen in my hand moved as steadily as it had back then, never stopping. A month before the college entrance exam, my parents called urgently. Suing had developed schizophrenia. She was acting erratically, questioning everyone. Why? Why don't you love me anymore? Was all the kindness you showed me in the past just a lie? My mother was sobbing uncontrollably on the other end of the phone. She's your Violet, just let her be. She cried in agony, but I listened numbly. Let her what? How can I let her? I asked. Summer was approaching. The sunset outside the dormitory was dazzling. I lowered my eyes and said softly, to regard love as the only thing in life is to tie oneself in knots. I hung up the phone and continued studying. A gentle breeze blew. It scattered the pages on my desk. I finished writing the last word, closed the pen, and looked up. Suddenly, I thought of my previous life, where I had also pursued love with such determination. Because I had never been loved, I longed for it desperately. To the point of losing myself. When I learned that Alexander had been secretly in love with Suing for 10 years, I had also broken down. I felt a strange pity for Suing. We had fallen into the thorns and traps of the world. We believed that those obsessions were love. We were all cowards swept away by love. June 8th. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I closed my pen and took a deep breath. The bell rang. The college entrance exam was over. 10 minutes later, the students rushed out of the school gate. The sun was shining brightly that day, and the breeze was gentle. We faced the sunlight and ran toward the great escape to victory. At the school gate, Jiang Xian was holding a bouquet of flowers and standing there. The sunlight shone on him, making him glow. It felt like the end of a dream. I smiled and said, being a recommended student is so easy. Then I took the bouquet. They were hydrangeas. May you pursue a bright future, he said. I looked up at him, completely serious. I will. Surprisingly, Alexander didn't take the college entrance exam. He took sleeping pills at home and turned on the gas. He attempted suicide. But he failed. Upon hearing this, I went to find him for the first time. In the hospital, he lay on the bed, pale and emaciated, looking extremely fragile. Seeing me, he forced a smile. You're here. I coldly asked him, why did you try to kill yourself? Alexander lowered his eyes. I wanted to tell you, he said, don't give up on me. I'm willing to die for you. Smack! Ignoring the nurse's attempts to stop me, I rushed forward and slapped him several times. Alexander's lifeless eyes gradually filled with tears. In your eyes, is life so worthless? I grabbed his collar and shouted, what's the point of dying for someone? Living for someone is the true honor. A gentle breeze blew the blue curtains in the hospital room. Alexander stared at me blankly. I won't come to see you again. Before leaving, I said to him, goodbye. The ward door slowly closed. That was the last time we saw each other. The college entrance exam results were out. Jiang Xian was even more nervous than I was. After logging into the inquiry interface, he clasped his hands together and bowed to the computer. I laughed. How did you become so superstitious? Jiang Xian said, I've always been superstitious. It seemed true. I recalled when we were in middle school, he had once read my palm. The time had come. Jiang Xian took my hand, as if performing a ritual. He smiled, his eyes crinkling, I'm passing my good luck to you. What if I want all your good luck? Of course I'll give it to you. I smiled too. My heart felt like soft cotton. Finally, we clicked the query button together. Jiang Xian looked at the score and said, Lillian, you're really amazing. My eyes started to tear up. I said, of course I'm amazing. Then I said, Jiang Xian, let's go to Washington together. Jiang Xian nodded. Many years later. I had many friends closer than family. I was even adopted as a granddaughter by an old woman. I began sponsoring poor girls to go to school, giving them all a new lease on life. Time was brilliant. Life was small yet great.